members, I can advise we've received apologies from the chair today, so can I first ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting? Just so those members on Teams are clear, we also have Councillor Beretti here in the chamber. Thank you.
If Councillor Beretti is happy to take the chair, then I'm force him.
Second that.
Councillor Beretti is likely to be happy, but thank you very much, councillors.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Councillor Beretti to join at the top table. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. Apologise for the hiccup that we have with Councillor Campbell, but hopefully he's okay. So good morning, good afternoon, members, and welcome to this public meeting of the Climate, Environment and Biodiversity Subcommittee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members may notice that when calling members to speak, I will refer to them formally and using their title, e.g. Councillor Jones, so that it is clear who are the councillors and who are, by process, elimination of officers. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guide, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you are not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you are in the hall, you can do this on your phone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period or time and write leave in the Teams chat function, and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. Similar to the process now followed at full council, when considering motions / amendments which are substantive in nature, I'll call a recess where necessary so that I may seek governance advice on competency. This is good practice in governance terms and will also provide for governance to be able to collate and circulate the terms of said motion amendments to members in order that they have opportunity to properly review it. Hope this process makes matters more effective, and I seek members' support in implementing this. First off, we have sediment apologies, and I will give one apology for Councillor Dashford, who may be a little bit late, but will turn up. Clear?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 6 members present. 2 apologies received from Councillors Campbell and Slater. I've advised that Councillor Dashford may be late, and the remaining 5 members all present on Teams. Thank you.
Do any members have a declaration of interest and statements of connection? Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a statement of connection for item 4 in that I'm COSLA's Environment and Economy spokesperson, but obviously the work that I'm doing within that space is national, so I'll stay for the debate.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? We'll go to the minutes of previous meeting. This minute is for noting only. Do members agree the content of the previous meeting?
No, then.
Take that as a yes from everyone. Okay, we're going on to agenda item 4, which is the purpose of this meeting, and that's the draft climate change plan consultation response. To inform members and seek input on the proposed consultation response on the draft climate change plan produced by Scottish Government currently out for consultation. The recommendations are, members are asked to note the existing... Okay. Sorry about that. This report make members aware of a clerical error on the agenda where at 2.2 of the recommendations it reads note, to note the proposed consultation, and should read to consider the proposed consultation as stated in the report. And 2.3 agree to the Head of Economy and Environment and Environmental Management finalising and submitting the Council's response by the advised deadline of the 29th of January 2026. Members, what's this one? Simon Fieldhouse and Sarah Farrell are available to take any questions on this report. And I also believe we have a new member of the Environment team, and his name is Skye Halford. And he's joining us in Teams, so if Skye is there. Yep. Yeah, yes, okay. Right, now, that's basically going to start. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Obviously, we've got item 4 on the agenda, and certainly my recommendations are to consider rather than to note, so that's helpful just for the clarity on that one. I just wanted to ask more in terms of a governance question on this, because I'm really mindful of the delegations as printed in our papers today, and there's a scrutiny element, but when it comes to decision making, all the points in our delegations is to recommend to the appropriate committee for decision making. So I just want to clarify that we do indeed have the power within the climate subcommittee to agree, making an agreement for this council response by the deadline. And I appreciate the deadline is very, very tight. So it's just really the governance around this, because obviously the scrutiny, there's a huge opportunity, and it's appropriate and correct that we scrutinise this, but do we have the ability to agree this? And, you know, I just wonder whether, you know, perhaps maybe in a governance sense, this needs to be agreed to delegate, as similar as to what we do in full council, to delegate to the head of economy and to finalise, perhaps even on by including group leaders as well. Just as I say, I just want to ensure that our governance is tight on this one before we get into the actual discussion on the response. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just ask Stuart to come in on this question.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hagman. So the actions that we're seeking to precipitate today are precipitated by that very tight agenda of the 29th of January for the Scottish Government, which, although we have asked, it was not accepted that we could get an extension to that. So we have brought this meeting forward with the scheduled meeting that had previously been in the diary for early February, just so that we can get this response in front of the subcommittee and to collate responses from members having considered the reports. I'll take your guidance on that, but and governance's guidance on the steps to be able to formalise that. But our intent is always to go back into session with the E&I committee on the considerations that the subcommittee has given, and to sort of formalise those comments at that stage. But as I say, the actions that we're needing to follow up on today are precipitated by that Scottish Government deadline.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just bring in Simon at this point to give a little bit of an overview if there's anything you want to say further to what's been written and what you expect from the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as highlighted, this is a draft. We are seeking, obviously, members' input to ensure that we are obviously tackling the most pressing priorities at a local level, given the opportunity to respond to the climate change sort of draft plan that's come out. Obviously, we're wanting to ensure that we can try and, I suppose, look at additions, amendments within, obviously, Appendix 6, to provide obviously officers with more scrutiny from a local member's perspective. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Well, if members at this stage, if we go straight away to page 355, which is the start of all the questions, and we are, well, I don't want to read out every single question because that will add an awful amount of time. I'm assuming that you've all got the papers in front of you. And I will start off with question 1. What are the views on our approach to delivering a just transition for people and communities? So with what is written there, is there agreement or is there any modifications that one wishes to make? Councillor Tribert.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we've put this through full council that we obviously want to get to net zero as quickly as possible, and part of that will be the draft climate change plan, and I don't have any issues with that.
Okay, thank you, Archie. So no amendments to that. Anyone else? Councillor McGregor?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I'm jumping about on my iPad between ModGovern and the Teams app. So if I'm a bit delayed, I apologise. I'll maybe go and get my laptop. I think the key for me within this, and I don't know which question it will sit within, but I think maybe the first one would be a good starter for 10, is that we need to emphasise that we need sufficient funding, both capital and revenue, for any schemes that come through the draft plan. And I think that needs to be very strongly emphasised. And the other area that we have concern, or I have concern around, is that there's no delivery plan. So it's a draft plan, but it's not actually telling us what we need to be doing and who will be doing it and when they will be doing it. So I just wonder if we can make some sort of nod towards the government creating an actual delivery plan. Because this is high level stuff. It's not what we're going to be doing on the ground at local level. I think our response on the whole is very good, but those are the two areas that I think really need to be strengthened.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGregor. I see the officials scribbling away, diligently taking your notes there. I have got no further modifications I would like to make. So is there anyone else with any suggestions, and we can put question 1 to bed? Okay, question 2. We recognise that the workers face particular impacts from the plan and that we have outlined our approach to supporting the transition of the workforce, including skills for jobs. What skills, training and qualification provisions will be most important in the net zero future, and what more could be done to support them? I have got suggestions, but I'd like to open it up to the floor first. take it that's no one saying anything. In the component where you've got in the first sentence, Simon, heat pump installation, one of the things that I've noticed is that the commissioning of heat pumps is arbitrary from what I've seen, and certainly in my ward. So I would like to put something in about the qualification and the commissioning of heat pumps. I also noticed that that would also include PV installation and commissioning. Is that okay? Right, if there's no other comments, we'll go on to question 3. The plan will bring opportunities and challenges for businesses and employers. How can we best support employers across the private, public and third sectors to make the changes needed and seize the benefits of net zero? Likewise, I have things, but Councillor Johnston?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just when I'm looking at this question, we have tailored advice and grants for SMEs in rural areas, specifically focus on transport, infrastructure and supply chains. Now, in our own business, it's actually production processes. Are they encompassed within the supply chain part, Stuart or Simon? Or are production processes not considered?
Through yourself,
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah.
Just to confirm, I think obviously we were trying to possibly simplify that, Councillor Johnson, just by providing supply chains, but we're happy to put in additional narrative if we're looking at the production process, just to ensure that's properly recognised.
Yeah, even if it's just processes, Simon, just something like that.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to come in there? No, okay.
No, thanks, Tony. It was just to say that exactly what Simon had said. We had put that sort of in the supply chain thing, but happy to add something else in. Thank you.
Okay, right, thank you. Just as a matter of interest, I've got something similar to what Councillor Jordan has said, because within that area, I know that D&G College are doing an awful lot in additive process 3D printing. And I think something that would take into account that type of technology and flexibility in future manufacturing capacity. Is that okay, Simon? Okay, we'll go on to question 4. Our approach recognises that some of the plan's impacts will have greater implications for particular regions of Scotland. What are your views on our approach to supporting places where the transition presents particular regional impacts? Members, any questions? Councillor Dryburgh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if, obviously this is Dumfries and Galloway Council's response, but is there any in there about working with our partners such as South of Scotland Enterprise and things like that we should emphasise that working in partnership to get to some solutions would be helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Archie. Likewise, I've got also encourage net zero participation systems, such as autonomous pods. So I do agree, and I've also got PV infrastructure, but I'll let Councillor Hardman come in as well.
Thanks for this. I mean, certainly Councillor McGregor's touched upon, the funding element of this, and certainly in the response that officers have pulled together, it suggested that we recommended targeted funding for rural EV infrastructure, active travel routes and nature-based solutions to manage flood risk. Obviously, those are 3 specific points. I think, Archie's just made the point there about partnership working. And one of the things that's not in there is, and I'll maybe bring it in one of the other questions as well, is the D&G Food Sustainability Partnership and the work that's being done in terms of regenerative farming. And certainly there was a nod to regenerative farming as part of Scottish Government's budget just last week, was it last week? 13th. So, you know, where are we ensuring that, you know, farmers and land use, obviously that's quite specific in EV infrastructure, active travel and nature-based solutions, but I would like to see a little bit stronger in our response, the food aspect of this. And the Good Food Nation bill is referenced further on in the report as well. But you know, there are approaches to procurement, etc., that can all tie into this. So if it's possible to just even give a nod to some of that, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Anyone else want to come in on that question? I'll move on to question 5. I'll let Stuart in first.
Thanks for those points, councillors. So I think what we will seek to do is elaborate on this particular question, because I think there is, this is obviously a national consultation, there is a particular dimension to that which we need to make the point that some of this policy needs to be seen through a rural lens, and then beyond a rural lens through a South of Scotland, then a Dumfries and Galloway lens, so that it becomes very particular to the circumstances within our own region. So, and Councillor Hagman has set out a number of those relating to land use, food production, regenerative agriculture, as well as the sort of the net zero infrastructure and technology aspects of that as well. So we'll seek to pick that up.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. So if there's no further comments on question 4, I'll move to question 5, section 2, page 356. How can we decarbonise homes and buildings in a way that is fair and leave no one behind? Any starters? Okay, what points I made there was the additional support and third line down at the bottom, additional support, financial and legislative, make it clear that it does in our area require a lot of that. Is that okay, Simon? Okay. Move on to question 6. How can clean heating systems and in brackets such as heat pumps be made more affordable for everyone? Any comments? I'm not seeing any hands up, so I will put in my penny's worth here. I believe that the heat pumps and a lot of the installations are expensive, so I would like to see some form of management of the costs and maybe limiting, if possible, cost, and also that heat pumps, although it's in brackets, there is no one system fits all for what we have. Okay. Right, question 7. Now, this one I expect there will be some debate because it's a question of what do you want as a priority. Which of the following would be most effective in enabling you to transition your vehicle or vehicles to zero emission alternatives? Please rank your choices from highest to lowest priority, where 1 is the highest priority. Please give only 1 ranking to each option. Now, if I'm right, Councillor McGregor, you don't have the papers in front of you, so you won't know, is that correct, what those 7 things are? Is that correct?
No, I've got the papers in front of me. I'm just jumping between 2 screens.
Right, okay.
I've got it all here.
So if everyone has got them, what I want to do is I want to bring in Simon first to give a rationale for the ranking that he put, and then I'm going to ask for alternative rankings.
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. And obviously, when we considered this, we were looking at, I suppose, sort of the information to hand, and obviously structured stuff in a way that looked relatively sort of, I suppose, conducive to what we're facing across the region. Predominantly looking at how we might attract people in to utilising sort of, I suppose, vehicles with low or zero emissions. And as such, obviously, one of the key things that keeps coming back time and time again was obviously range anxiety. So hence why we obviously were focusing on the infrastructure required, as the primary purpose to obviously ensure that we had a network across the region that would be suitable and reliable for people to make that transition to vehicles. Then we looked obviously at the cost around the vehicles and access to funding and support to ensure obviously people can take these things forward. I'm not sure, Sarah, whether you want to come in with any other sort of options, but I think sort of those were the top three, and then the rest were very much sort of, you know, obviously sort of very subjective in terms of how we looked at it.
Sarah?
Yeah, if I could come in, if you don't mind. No, we came to that conclusion as Simon has mentioned, but we have also, just for information for yourselves, have also been in, obviously, working in conjunction with our transport colleagues, and they have agreed to the questions on transport and the answers that have been given to come forward to yourselves, obviously, for comment. So it was just to give you that comfort that, you know, we have been working along with the transport colleagues, and we haven't just sort of come up with that on our own.
Councillor Dryburgh.
I'm slow on the today. I mean, reliable infrastructures for vehicles such as fuel or charging networks, and obviously being involved in different organisations across the UK. What their suggestion is fuel such as the Euro 6 engine is probably better than the EV for the RCVs, for instance. And we need to make sure that when we're making these draft responses and responses to the consultation, that it comes back to that, not one thing will cover everybody in Scotland. So I think there has to be, I'm reasonably quite happy with the way you've got that, but I think we need to give a reason why the reliable infrastructure vehicles such as fuel or charging networks is in there. And I think the fuel one is because of the size of the region that we have.
Yeah, thank you, Archie. I would agree. Is there anyone else who has any views on this? Because I do have a list of changes that I would like to propose, but I'll just wait if anyone else is wanting to come in. Nope. Okay. Simon, if I give you my list of how I'd like those 7 priorities, and you take them down, and will you comment on them? The top ranking I would put.
Sorry, Chair, just come in. You're going to give your list, but there is suggestions here from the officers, and whilst they may be minor changes, I think it's important that the committee have that say rather as yourself individually.
Yes, I agree, but if I have got the list here, I'd made it up. I wasn't aware that I was going to be made chair, so I've got a number of, I would just redirect all of those. So it's not all completely changed, but it's just, I would prioritise some over the others, if that's fine. I put down point 4 as number 1, point 3 as number 2, point 2 as number 3, point 7 as number 4, point 1 as number 5, point 6 as number 6, and point 5 as number 7. Have you got a list of that, Simon?
Yes, Chair.
Do you want to comment? Councillor Hagman.
Chair, is it possible, rather than just saying number 1, number 5, the numbers are a bit lost with me. I do have the papers in front of me, but could you possibly read out, because they're only one sentence of your preferred option, so that we can look at that, because I appreciate telling me number 3 is number 4. That's quite difficult to follow, and I appreciate it'd be quite useful to understand your rationale behind that, so we can come to a committee decision. Thanks.
Okay, I'll let Simon come in first, but it may well be that we'll just take a 5-minute recess so that that list can be put out. And I do expect that it's something for debate. And as Archie said, it's not just my decision, it's just everyone looking at it.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, the proposals that you've put forward in terms of changing the priority, again, as I started off, I mean, obviously, there is a degree of subjective sort of analysis to this. As Sarah's kind of highlighted, we have been in contact with colleagues from transportation to assist with that. I'm happy that obviously sort of the revised or the revision is maybe sort of taken through a recess and put to the elected members for consideration. So we can obviously look at where there is some synergy, as there are some synergies there, and there are some that are obviously sort of, you know, are realigning.
If that's okay with members, what we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute recess so that the Claire can get this into Claire. Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, if there's other questions that have significantly that any member or group want to bring forward, is it maybe better to consider all those in the recess rather than stopping in case there's any other questions coming up? Just otherwise we might be here for quite some time. If we're going, there's 33 questions to get through. We're on question 7.
That's a difficult one, Councillor Hagman, because from all the other questions, I don't see that there's any anything that's controversial. But if you want to park question 7 till right at the end, and we can go through them, and then we'll get Claire to do this right at the end. Is that okay with everyone? Right, okay, that seems I've had no... Oh, Councillor Hagman's thumbs up, so we'll do that. Okay, so we'll go on to question 8. How can the Scottish Government support communities to participate in planning of local sustainable infrastructure, brackets, such as walking, wheeling and cycling routes? Any comments? Councillor Walters?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the comment at the bottom, which says 20 minutes neighbourhoods don't work in rural areas. So a revision on focus would be supported. I think if this is a feedback from the whole of Dumfries and Galloway, as in including communities and towns and areas, I don't think we should perhaps be as straightforward as that, saying that 20-minute neighbourhoods don't work in rural areas, because I wouldn't want that to be quoted as consultation feedback. I understand I think I understand what the officer's getting at in terms of saying that it's different in a rural area, but obviously we have rural areas and we have towns as well. I would suggest it would be better if it recognised the difficulties of implementing 20-minute neighbourhoods in largely rural areas, something like that, rather than just boldly stating they don't work. That's my suggestion.
I'll just bring in Simon. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. Yeah, more than happy to make those amendments, Councillor Walters. I think obviously it was just trying to highlight in the draft version that obviously we do have significant challenges due to the rurality and the space between our communities, but happy to find a formal words that addresses your concerns.
Councillor Johnson, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Is it you want to come in as well?
It was me, Chair, but I'm quite happy with what Simon said.
Okay, thank you, Archie. The only thing that I noticed in that was that with the public transportation, one of the things that we don't often see is the e-bike accessible options on likes of buses, so that would be the only thing I would note. Right. Question 9. What action by the Scottish Government would be most helpful in supporting you to live a more climate-friendly lifestyle? Anyone start with that? Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I mean, my comments on this one, although it's sort of touched upon, is again, about that investment in rural public transport. I think there's many people across the region who would be happy to use public transport, but it's simply not an option. And I think notably strengthening the rail connections within D&G, and I appreciate there's not that many of them, but from Stranraer to get to Glasgow, the rail connections of the network, the times, they're just simply not, they're not fit for purpose if you want to try and use that for commuting. And so therefore a lot of people end up maybe driving to Ayr and then jumping on. And actually, if those rural right into the south of Scotland could be strengthened, that'd be really helpful. And equally from Dumfries going up via Sandcar and up to Cumnock, again, the railways every 2 hours, that's not helpful for anybody who wishes to use that line to commute up to Kilmarnock and up into the central belt as well. So I think for me, we do need to highlight that we need that investment in the public, in the rural transport area, and I know that there's been a lot of lobbying done in terms of that rural public transport element.
Councillor Walters, do you want to come in?
Yeah, funny enough, I wanted to emphasise the same point that Councillor Hagman has just said about the inclusion of some sort of ambitious railway infrastructure, because obviously the Stranraer issue and also the possibility of reopening stations, for instance, which the Scottish Government has been very negative on in terms of the locals trying to get particular stations reopened in the Nith Valley. So yeah, so we can have something in there to include support for, you know, the railway infrastructure. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Keith. There's no one else coming in. My input would be third line, as instead of it as bike purchases, I would put EV bike purchases, and also the concept of low-cost community EV transport systems. In other words, community collaboration. Anyone else? And we'll move on to question 10. Are there any additional proposals to support waste sector emissions reductions that should be considered across the following 5 areas? Any comments? Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, thanks. I'd be really interested to hear from Simon on this one. And my question relates to the food waste. Now, legally, we only have to collect food waste from certain areas that have a centre of population. And I understand that, you know, that comes with a financial cost to the local authority. Again, it goes back to the comments Councillor McGregor made in terms of fully funding local government to bring forward these changes. But is there a way that we can roll out food waste in a rural area that then makes it, you know, more sustainable? And as I say, I'm not an expert on this. It's just I'm really conscious that, you know, there's many of my constituents who would really like to do food waste collections, but they just we don't have the infrastructure in part, and maybe that comes under the anaerobic digestion. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in this field. I would never claim to be. So I would be really interested to hear from officers on that one. Thanks, Chair.
Simon, do you want to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously looking at the opportunities we put in there, obviously, for community and business composting, and obviously the support for anaerobic digestion for farm waste. So it was looking at trying to see whether through, I suppose, targeted schemes within certain rural areas, we could look at creating pilots that would provide the opportunity for local food waste collection, that would obviously sort of, you know, look at a limited opportunity for how we might reduce food, I suppose, food miles, food waste going into obviously landfill and everything else. So that was the thought behind that. It is very tricky, and obviously we are aware that obviously it requires community participation, but that's where we're kind of focused. If we can get communities and businesses involved, we might be in a position to obviously try and address that at a local level.
Okay, thank you, Simon. For my input, I was looking within that, not also sort of related to what Councillor Hagman said, is giving financial incentives for community collection of certain materials. So that could be whatever that would be practical, but that's how I would by participation. If there's no one else, I'll go on to question 11. What are your views on Scotland generating more electricity from renewable sources? Anyone want to start with that? How did I guess? Councillor Dryborough?
The only thing I would say on this year is we are producing 7 times more than we actually need in this particular area. And one of the problems, of course, is the infrastructure that's in place to deliver that to the national grid. So I'm quite happy for more electricity to be made from renewable resources. I'd like to see more PV, but in the appropriate places, just to make sure that we can deliver that. And I would rather see PV than wind farms.
Okay, thank you, Archie. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would be doing my constituents a disservice if I didn't bring up the fact that, there's very much a feeling, and I hear across community councils, that we're producing all these electricity, or the wind turbines are producing huge amounts of energy, but bills are not coming down. And that is it's both a political statement and a fact, and a comment that gets made at practically every meeting where renewables are discussed. Why are our bills so high? So I think it would be, what are the council's views? I think equally from a local authority point of view, why, as a local authority, are we not able to tap in to ensure our own energy costs are lower, because we are so close to source for some of these energy producing wind farms? So I don't know how that would be captured. I would also, I think there's no mention in there in terms of tidal, and I appreciate that's new technology, but noting, the likes of the Solway has these huge tidal tides coming in and out. Is there an opportunity that we should be utilising more offshore and tidal opportunities within Scotland? Because obviously we have got a huge amount of onshore wind generation, but where are there opportunities elsewhere? But I think, tying it into, Scotland does produce a huge amount of energy, and, where is the benefit to individuals, but also, as I say, to our public bodies, our public sector? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I know the question really does revolve around the Scotland generating electricity from renewables. And clearly, Dumfries and Galloway is part of that. I've got a thing that I would like to put in, but I'll bring in Stuart first, just to answer about some of those points.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the comments on all of that. So I think there is a broadening out, first of all, of the mix of energy that we perhaps reference in answering this question. Photovoltaics, tidal, hydrogen is another source as well that hasn't been mentioned, that we can perhaps scope into that. And I think our perspective on it, obviously this is a national level question, and there are national policy positions around all of this, but I think from the comments that members are making here is about that local benefit sharing, and that those opportunities for local supply as well. So we can perhaps reflect that in the paragraph, or more emphasise that local benefit sharing dimension to that response, as a way of going some way to setting out the council's position on the support for more renewable source type generation, and a broadening of that, of those methods of generation, but the desire to see more of those local benefits being expressed within region as well.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. The only point I would make on question 11 is that as this is aimed at Scotland generating, I would like to see help towards battery energy storage systems into the mix, and in part that would help alleviate some of those points that have been made by elected members of not having a grid system to transport energy, but if there are battery energy storage systems built into the system in various locations around the country, then you can offset, and in some ways that will look at reducing the energy costs locally in potential microgrids and community energy systems. So I hope that could be captured. Okay. Question 12. What support do industries need to reduce their carbon emissions while remaining competitive? Anyone want to start? Okay, I don't see anyone, so I came in the first sentence, you've got advice and grants for energy, but I would say and incentives. I don't know if that, it's not just grants, but incentives to do it. That could be based on different levels of participation. Okay. Question 13. Talking about agriculture and land use. How can the Scottish Government encourage sustainable land use that is also productive for local communities? Anyone want to start? Councillor Dryburgh.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. And again, we've done work on this before about land use, and we've got a land use policy for the south of Scotland as well. Again, in partnership with Borders and South of Scotland Enterprise. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to put a link in that answer to our land use policy.
Simon.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Yeah, we can get a link inserted in that. That's absolutely fine.
Councillor Hagman.
Thank you. So, I mean, obviously within the response, it's already referenced in here about regenerative farming. I wonder whether there's an opportunity to highlight the opportunity of public sector procurement in terms of what we're purchasing as a, in terms of food production. And I appreciate it does state in there, ensure that there's better alliance with the regional food plan. Well, we don't have a regional food plan as yet, or the one we had. I know we had an ambition previously, and again, there's the sustainability partnership. But I'd like to maybe see that strengthened, that not just a better alliance, but that we're actually, there's support and there's education. And I do wonder where the education element of that sits, because, our young people are hugely interested in the environment, in sustainable land use. We want, whether it's forestry, agroforestry, whether it's farming and regenerative farming, we want to be able to offer opportunities and jobs to our young people, and we need to have that level of education. So I don't know how that would be captured, but I do think that there needs to be a level of engagement and education also within that. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. I think that's been captured by the officers. My input would be that in this, would like to see the modernisation of equipment and the incentivisation of changing things. And although it wasn't mentioned, agrivoltaics and battery energy storage systems would come into this play here to allow farmers and forestry to cut costs and potentially change to electric transportation systems. Okay, I think this cat. Oh, Simon. Stuart.
I think what just spurred on by Councillor Hagman's point there around some of the education dimensions to this and the inclusion of, I suppose, taking younger generations along with us on our, even our own work as well as the work that's happening nationally. We'll try and find spaces within these questions at appropriate points as to where we might be able to drop that in. Section 3 on impact assessments might be a place where we can sort of weave that in. We'll have a look at that, some wording around that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Right, question 14. What do you think about our proposals for planting trees and restoring natural habitats like peatlands? Anyone got any comments? I don't see any hands going up, and I don't have any comments. I'm quite happy with that question, so I'll move on to question 15. How can the Scottish Government support farming to become more climate friendly while continuing to support food production and improve biodiversity? Any comments? Councillor Hartman.
Yeah, it's the point I've made repeatedly. I'll keep making it. The buying power of local government procurement, if there's incentives, you know, government, in my view, whether it's local or national, should be leading by examples, and essentially, you know, we should be supporting farmers in terms of those climate friendly approaches. So, you know, the buying power, the actual finances of who's purchasing such things, I think is really important.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see any other hands come up. So in this, I would also stick in, well, I would like to see something about agrivoltaics and battery energy storage systems, because they do tend to work better together, and it's a technology and an industry which is gaining in prominence, and certainly in Europe and other places in America. Right, we'll go on to question 16, impacts assessment. Which groups or communities do you think will be most affected by the transition to net zero, and in what ways? Anyone want to start? I don't see any hands up. I've got something here, living in rural accommodation or rented accommodation, and certainly in short let stays, that is kind of restrictive for anyone who wants to do that. And living in flats and houses of low build quality, I think that's a disincentive for people to say, for instance, take in or purchase EVs, and certainly even bikes, given that there is quite often a degree of security around the charging of batteries on bikes. I think Simon and Stuart have got that covered. Right, question 17. How do you think the climate change plans aligns with the existing local, regional or national priorities that you are aware of or involved in? Anyone want to start? I don't see any hands up, and I would assume, I take that as agreement that question 17 is fine. I would also say I've got no comments on question 17, so I'll move on to question 18. If you identified there could be negative impacts of the climate change plans, are there any ways you think we could reduce the negative impact, and if so, what would you recommend? Open over to Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I was going to come in this one anyway, which links into my comment about the education. And obviously, Stuart, you referenced that it might be an opportunity. And I wonder within this one, under community engagement and education, you know, I think maybe there's an opportunity to link into that. I mean, I didn't mention working with the colleges, etc. But, you know, in terms of mitigation, education is a huge issue on that one.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Anyone else want to come in? I've got no comments on this particular question. If I don't see anyone, I'll just move on to question 19. Please share any other quantitative data or sources of this to assist in development of the impact assessments. Anyone want to start? Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I just wonder. I mean, the question or the response does include habitat and species mapping from local environmental resources centre and the regional land use framework. I'm wondering whether there's other organisations in the region that we support, such as the Southern Upland Partnership, such as the UNESCO Biosphere, that maybe have, you know, significant work. And this is maybe in relation to question 20, if there's previous examples or case studies considering whether that could be linked in with some of the work that they've done. It's not necessarily a response that we've done ourselves, but how does that sit in? Because obviously these are outside organisations that we as a local authority support through elected member representation. So it's just how do we highlight some of that really good work that's happening with our third sector partners?
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. We'll maybe sort of, in relation to question 20, we'll maybe sort of see if we can work with some of our partners to include some of the opportunities and activities that have been done through the Biosphere in terms of Climate Hub and activities that they're moving forward on. Obviously, we can look at, in question 19, expanding some of the sort of the information obtained not just from local environmental resource centres but from local, I suppose, environmental agencies and partners that we collaborate with on a regular basis to try and capture that.
Thank you, Simon. That was more related to question 20, is that correct?
Related to both, Chair. I mean, obviously, as I say, we can expand on the local environmental resource centres to include obviously other examples and organisations that we work with on a regular basis, and then 20 we can obviously work with other groups to identify examples that may be coming forward.
Okay, all right, thank you, Sam. If there is one, Councillor Dryburn, you come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I would agree with Katie on putting those examples in place, but there's also the local place plans as well, which may have some environmental parts in their plan.
Okay, Archie. Right, there is one piece of data I would say probably needs to be put in, and that's population demographics map or statistics to show the concentrations of populations and the makeup of those populations within our area. Thumbs up from Simon. Question 20, are there any previous examples of case studies we should consider when assessing potential impacts? Now, I know Councillor Hargan has already made comments on that. Is there anyone else to make comments? I have none on this. Nope. Okay, we'll move on to question 21. Can you think of any further positive or negative impacts that are not covered in the impact assessments that may result from the climate change plan? Open to members. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the response that we're intending to give, because it's saying that the climate change plan may have negative impacts on rural housing affordability and workforce mobility. I'm not quite sure. Well, if we're going to say that, I think we should actually expand a little on why we think that is the case. Those are obviously issues for us as an economy, but I'm not sure how the climate change plan is going to have a negative impact on those two issues. If you know, thanks.
I'll bring in Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously where we were trying to capture this, and maybe Sarah might be able to expand a little bit more, was obviously that if we are looking at retrofitting some of the sort of the housing stock we have across the region, there's likely to obviously potentially have an impact in terms of the cost of and affordability of the premises, which can obviously lead to further pressures downstream. And obviously, you know, we are putting forward some of the measures in place in terms of how we might look at the mobility of the region's workforce through sort of public transport, but obviously we don't have these schemes in place at this moment in time, but we can look at a further form of wording that might elaborate that a little bit better to clarify the issue further. Councillor Walters.
Sarah, you've come up on the screen. Do you want to say something?
Well, just to say that yes, that also could have a positive impact on the economy and the employment across the region, and that where this field can support employment across the region, and working along with the colleges and bringing that process right through from college into work and enhancing skills. So a positive impact is, you know, as much as anything else, really.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll bring Stuart in as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a question that we can broaden out. I think, as Sarah says and Simon, is that there are two sides to some of this. There are enormous opportunities afforded to the region because of its location, because of the level of interest in investment in the technologies and the infrastructure around renewable energies, and the potential for that to then feed into business growth, new skills development and new opportunities within the region. So that's a positive. But a lot of the upgrading of rural housing, particularly if you think about new rural housing and upgrades through either building standards, which is primarily where it gets driven in terms of the increases in insulation requirements and the integration of renewable energy technology into houses, etc., does increase the base cost of a house. So we, in terms of commissioning new housing, grant funding new housing through housing associations, etc., we get less for the available money that we have. So there needs to be that reflection that there are some of these dimensions do come at a cost, and we need to be mindful of that and make that point that we are extremely ambitious, for example, within Dumfries and Galloway, relating to the responding to the housing emergency, but our ability to do that gets slightly constrained by the escalation of some of the standards that then are more expensive to deliver, and then therefore we get less for our available money. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I see that Councillor Dashper has just joined us just a few minutes ago, so I'll just give him a chance to open up his book document. We're on page 359, Ben, and we're about to do question 22, so we're on the section 4 Strategic Environment Assessment. What are your views on the accuracy and scope of the environmental baseline set out in the environmental report? Are you aware of further information that could be used to inform the assessment findings? Over to members. Councillor Drybrook.
I think the issue here for me is about the understanding of an environmental baseline, especially with the type of language that is used and things like that. So I would like to see a much more people-friendly, word-friendly type assessment as opposed to what we see in a lot of things in planning, for instance.
Okay, thank you, Archie. Don't see any other hands coming up, and I have no comments on question 22, so I'll move on to question 23. What, in your view, are the most significant environmental effects which should be taken into account as the draft climate change plan is finalised? Members? Councillor Drybrook.
Just maybe one question on this to Simon is, obviously we've done quite a bit of work on the draft climate change plan and the significant effects on future land use, habitation, flood risk, etc. I'm presuming that if we have that information, we can put again a link into that for the response.
Simon, you want to come in?
Hi, thank you, Chair, through yourself. Yeah, I think Councillor Driver, what we'll look at doing is obviously make reference to the information that we've pulled together as part of the land use planning documentation that we've obviously undertaken with ourselves and Borders to provide obviously that documentation and indication.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. One point I probably noted on this was that it's the instability of climate temperature predictions, and this really impacts farmer predictions on what they can grow and how that impacts if they get it wrong. Plus, we've also got historic food patterns in this area. How do you make climate predictions reliable? I don't see any other comments on 23. We'll go on to 24. What are your views on the predicted environmental effects as set out in the environmental report? Please share any other useful sources. Members? Councillor Walters. Oh, no, hang on, sorry, Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess this question could maybe link in with some of the responses that we put in question 20, because we do have a number of partnered organisations that are pulling together a lot of data and looking at indicator species and the work that's being done. And I think maybe just highlighting some of that and signposting to those organisations. As I said, I've said them previously, the Southern Upland Partnership, the Biosphere, the Solway Partnership as well. So, and also things like the Gallery Fisheries Trust, etc. They're all doing a huge amount of work, and signposting them as partners that we work with is really important.
Thank you, Katie. I don't see anyone else coming in, so I've got a couple of things that, and one similar to Councillor Hagman is the change in flora species, which would impact decision making within the region, and also disease-carrying insects, which would impact farming and various other things, because I already know that we've got, as of 2024, we've had malaria-carrying insects in the southern England, which fortunately were caught. But is that okay, Simon?
So, thank you, Chair. Yep, all good.
Yeah, sorry about that. Question 25. What are your views on the proposals for mitigation, enhancement and monitoring of the environmental effects set out in the environmental report? Members? Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, there's a theme going on here from me, but I'm sure none of you would expect anything less. We've got in response there, further work should be considered to integrate green infrastructure, and I'm not necessarily quite sure what that means. Is that public? I'm not sure what green infrastructure necessarily means, but I just wonder if it doesn't include whether we can add in to integrate green infrastructure and local food growing networks into planning. I'm just, again, and I'll just give an example of this. When met with a developer looking to do a 70-unit site in Newton Stewart, I referenced, you know, are you putting in any fruit trees, any food growing spaces? And the developer scratched their head and went, oh, that's a good idea. And I thought, my goodness, so you're not doing that as a standard already? And they weren't, because there's nothing in planning that says that consideration should be given to local food growing opportunities, which would then enhance and strengthen the biodiversity elements and food insecurity as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for that. I don't see any other comments, and I've got no comments, further comments on on question 25, so I'll move on to section 5 and then page 360. What are your views on the proposed approach to reporting annual emissions output and how this could support public understanding of Scotland's progress towards achieving our carbon budgets? Over to members. I don't see any hands coming up, and I don't have any comments. Councillor Hagman, you?
Yeah, thanks. I just wonder, and again, I'll maybe turn to Simon, whether this is encapsulated in it. Annual reporting, absolutely. Are we does that include investment spend in projects? You know, will that be monitored as part of the annual monitoring? Because I think it's quite a helpful indicator to see, well, you know, what financial input is going into to basically, you know, realise these ambitions. Apologies if I've missed it within the pack.
I'll bring in Simon.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. Yeah, we'll double check that, but we'll definitely make representation of that in terms of the spend levels to ensure that obviously we're trying to make sure that all of that data is captured. It should be included within the carbon budget, but we'll just reiterate that to be sure.
Thank you, Simon. Don't see anyone else wanting to comment. Question 27. How useful do you think reporting emission statistics at a more detailed level, including at the subsectoral level in paragraphs, would be in helping people understand key sources of emissions and our progress in reducing them? Members? Don't see anyone coming in, so the only comment I would make is at the bottom you've got agriculture versus transport, and I would also, I don't know if you could include housing in that and various types. Okay, got a thumbs up. Question 28. How might the use of timely indicators as proposed help people to understand what needs to be delivered to achieve our carbon budgets and to understand whether progress is on track? Now, there is a list there of 14 things. So, Simon, do you want to just quickly give a brief explanation of what they actually are?
Through yourself, Chair, I think section sort of 6, the 14 bits actually refers to question 29. Obviously what we're looking at for question 28 is obviously just the opportunity for having times associated with some of the indicators to ensure obviously that we can keep an eye on progress against obviously the uptake of certain activities.
Okay, thank you, Simon. So effectively we're going straight on to 29, is that correct? Yeah, okay. Please detail any specific changes that would improve any of the 14 proposed indicators, including any data sources not currently included within this framework that could provide a useful indicator of progress towards a just transition in Scotland on an annual basis. Members, Councillor Hagman.
Yep, I think this is the last time, but those got marking your bingo cards. Food sustainability again. We've got fuel poverty, we've got jobs, we've got energy. Food is missing off there in terms of, and you know, I think it's really disappointing because the Good Food Nation bill absolutely highlights the advantages of that in terms of climate, biodiversity, all the points that we're going to be making. So, I mean, I would like to see a 15th proposed indicator around food sustainability. I think it's vital. It's as important as fuel. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Only one indicator associated with air pollution and probably some of the others is personal health stats on respiratory illness type topology, and in that particular case, things associated with asthma and anything like that. I think they're scribbling away, taking notes. Yep, okay. Anyone else? Nope. Right. Question 30. What are the most appropriate indicators for judging whether we are achieving meaningful public participation in discussions related to the climate? This includes both the quality of the participatory process itself and the impact of that participation on the decision making. Members? Councillor Drybert.
I would agree with what's been said. Necessity encompass all local viewpoints. It's like to ensure that we can measure diversity of voices' influence on decisions. But I think we are making the decisions on behalf of Dumfries and Galloway as a local authority. We're not making it on behalf of, you know, some of the industries that are actually in there. So I think working with partners, we can, through our community planning partnership, for instance, maybe get some measures that they're happy with the capacity that we've done.
Councillor Hagman, you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what it is that we're looking for in response, because it's asking what are the most appropriate indicators, and it's saying why we need the indicators, but it doesn't. We don't actually say what are the indicators that would demonstrate that. So again, I'm wondering whether we need to expand. You know, are we wanting to give some actual worked examples, like, you know, do we do an annual public survey, or does the government do an annual? Do we do, you know, some in-person sessions? Is that going to be done on a national basis, or is there an expectation for local authorities to do that? And if so, is there going to be relevant budgets given to local authorities in order to really, you know, have that ongoing engagement with the public, because this is about public participation, not our third sector organisations, not about local authority, but, you know, really empowering our public communities as such.
Yeah, we're just having a quick debate, but I'll let Stuart come in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hagman. I agree, we probably haven't really answered the question on that one specifically. So I think we'll have to, we'll regroup around that, and in light of what you've said, and consider then what those indicators might be. Obviously, this is a national consultation. This would be national level work in terms of then making a judgment as to what levels of understanding and connection to the agendas have been able to have been achieved by public participation around all of this. I think we can point to some of our local work, which is really good examples of on the ground participatory processing, as examples of processes that have worked locally that can be followed nationally. But we'll have to. I think we will take that one away and redraft and come back post the meeting on that particular question.
Thank you, Stuart. But I did take that as something that would be done nationally. I think the only thing that from, well, whether it's a national or regional, the way I was looking at this was on what kind of platforms is climate change discussed. So the different platforms, is it workplaces, is it schools, is it digital platforms? I think that is something that I would expect to see in that question. But as Stuart said, he'll take it away and then give it back to us. Question 31. What indicator would provide the best measure of the impact of net zero development in local communities across Scotland? For example, the impact of the installation of renewable energy infrastructure on other land use changes through peatland, e.g. through peatland restoration or tree planting. Open to members. Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, so I referenced the importance of public transport previously, and I know that was one that Councillor Walters also alluded to. I just wonder, because, you know, the previous one was about the judging of whether we're making meaning. This is about the actual impact of the plan as such, and perhaps it's encompassed in some of the answers there, but I would really like to see public transport use being monitored as part of that. So the impact of communities, it says track economic benefits from renewables and land use and carbon reduction trends. But actually we would be, you know, it shouldn't be too difficult a trend to actually say, well, has there been an increase in public transport uptake? Have we had that investment? And, you know, how do we track that? Because ultimately there is a push to get people out of cars and onto public transport networks. So let's monitor it. Let's include that as part of the indicators.
Thank you, Katie. I have a comment on this, and I know it's probably pretty low tech. It's based on business experience, but we generally do tend to get data on how businesses are working locally, and sales statistics. Generally, if people are spending more, it means that they're actually managing to save in other areas. And would that be an indicator for data processing? Simon, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure that there are a couple of sort of quantitative sort of things that we could put in there to satisfy Councillor Hagman's sort of obviously push around sort of public transport, and also sort of I suppose spend profiles across the region.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of, spend profile. Thank you, Simon. Any other questions, any other comments on 31? No. Right, question 32. Ensuring positive outcomes for workers who have transitioned from jobs within high carbon industries is central to delivering a just transition. What specific data or indicators could we use to monitor the extent to which workers in high carbon industries are securing alternative employment? Now, I do realise that this is a question which is probably not as pertinent in Dumfries and Galloway because it's aimed at the fossil fuel industry and further north in the Aberdeen area. But I'd still welcome any comments. Councillor Dryburgh.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Chair, that it's probably for the Central Belt and north of Scotland. But we have had local, local job-specific things for people moving into. For instance, we were in Chapel Cross, and they moved from energy production to decommissioning, and that, in fact, is a climate issue. So I think there's potentially something there, but there's also engineering places like Cochrane's and Annan who have transferred from doing oil and gas boilers to electric boilers through renewable energy. So there might be something in there. I'm only suggesting that that's perhaps a couple of places where you can look at.
Thank you, Archie. I think what you're saying is that although we've had historic, which may not be around just now, but the historic industries, and there's a transition away from some of the equipment made by engineering companies, and that transition might be towards the net zero technologies. Is there a way of monitoring, again, the spending or the economic profile of those companies? Would that be something, Stuart?
I think that's a useful point because there are local examples of businesses who've transitioned in reaction to the emergence of new technology needs and a realisation that they have transferable skills within the business that can adapt and move into to different products. So I think that's probably worthwhile reflecting on that, reflecting that in the answer. So that it's not just about the employment side of things, but it's a way in which perhaps the Scottish Government can think about how to monitor sectoral transition at a business by business level.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. No further hands up, so I'll go on to question 33. What specific data or indicators could we use to meaningfully monitor the impact of the transition to net zero on the environment and biodiversity across Scotland on an annual basis? Members? I don't see any hands coming up. One of my thoughts was the combination of PV and BESS combinations and integration into the wide area of our industry and community life. Does that mean that if people or communities are buying into these systems that they realise that there is a validity of doing it? I think we're getting scribbling down on that. Simon, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I've captured those points. We'll see how we can incorporate it within that. There's also obviously what we've focused on is obviously the annual reporting around obviously sort of elements of biodiversity restoration through obviously peatland, woodland and species, but would obviously try and tackle and bring that back into the LBAP as well, which is currently underway.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That is the last question, but we still have question 7 to answer. So just for Councillor Dashper, if he's still there, yep. We're going to have a 10-minute, I think we'll have a 10-minute recess where we will send out the copy of these 7 rankings of the questions, and it's what I'll do is I'll put my ranking that I put down. Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do we need a full 10 minutes? I'm conscious there's a seminar starting in 5 minutes. And just in terms of my comments at the start, are we going to be sharing the response with chairs and vice chair of relevant service committee and leaders as per other consultations that we've done in the past, just so that there's continuity? I'm so conscious. I've had a great opportunity to feed into this, but there's such a small number of elected members on here, and this is a hugely important piece of work. Thanks.
It is a hugely important piece of work, but that's why we're here discussing it. And Claire does have the thing ready to go out, so I'll let Claire come in first, and then Stuart can come in.
Thank you. Just to assure you, it shouldn't take 10 minutes. We do have a table ready to distribute. Just need Councillor Beretti to reaffirm what his numbering was. As for the signing off of the consultation, that's linked to recommendation 2.3. So yes, Stuart might have something to add to that as well.
Stuart?
Yes, I think in the practice of acting on recommendation 2.3, what myself and the team will do is we'll incorporate all the comments that have been made today. If you can give us the power of the pen to do that, but we've taken notes all the way through, so we will do that. And as suggested by yourself, Councillor Hagman, we'll follow that usual process of consulting with the chair and vice chair of E&I and the group leaders, just to get that broad agreement and sign off, and we'll be able to have time to do that by the 29th of January. So we'll have to move at a little bit of pace, but we've got the time to do that. Apologies.
Right, hopefully Claire will have sent it out.
Sorry, Chair, I just need you to reaffirm what your numbering was. I've got everything else.
Right, if you just give me a few moments, I'll do that with Claire and then we'll proceed. What we'll do is we'll just adjourn for 2 minutes and then we'll get that done. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm aware that there is another seminar and it should be starting very shortly. So I'll let Stuart come in just to explain what is going to happen with this, okay?
Thank you, Chair. So we're keen to hear from members if they have any further thoughts on the ranking that's presented within the report and the email that's come with the Chair's thoughts on that ranking. We would be more than happy to receive by email responses to that, and we would cast our eye across all of those thoughts in terms of any alternative rankings that might come in, and do a form of consolidation of all of that. It is thereby quite important that we then act under your direction on recommendation 2.3 and recirculate the concluded response through the Chair and Vice Chair of E&I and the group leaders to get a collective and final response prepared and to be able to be submitted to the government.
Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, I'm looking at the proposed different rankings on here, and I'm not convinced that they're the correct ones, but it maybe needs further. And the example, just the first two there, elevating the cost of used zero emission vehicles to a higher level of new zero emission levels. I'm not sure that's quite correct, because there's a lot of support for new vehicles, it's supporting the industry. There's often finance available for new vehicles that isn't available for used. So while I think that it's quite a complex one. I'm happy to maybe put both options out, if it's an option, to the group leaders to delegate to head to find maybe a compromise solution with this one, because I'm not sure that we'll actually be able to come up with the correct ranking at this point right now, because the way it's presented right now, I think the current ranking is my preference, but I appreciate that it's a complex one on there. I think the fact that cheaper running costs is at 6, and that should be the first one. I don't think it should be 6, but I also don't think it should be the first either. So I'm happy to maybe propose that we delegate this to the head of service and group leaders for a final proposal. Thanks.
Yes, I did think this was going to be a difficult question to answer, but I think rather than trying to debate it over now, as there's many nuances and market forces that imply those questions, we'll park it there. So I'm going to go directly to recommendations. Members are asked to note the existing consultation being run by the Scottish Government outlined within paragraphs 4.1 to 4.10 and appendices 1.5 to 22. To consider the proposed consultation response as presented in Appendix 6 and 2.3 agreed to the head of Economy and Environment Manager finalising and submitting the Council's response by the advised deadlines of the 29th of January 26. Are members in agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, I take it that's agreed. So, just until I change my page, right. John, 5, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision. I have no other urgent business, so that concludes the meeting. Could I thank you all for your contributions, and the next meeting will take place on the 2nd of June 2026. Right, thank you, members.
Many thanks.